بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين وعلى صحابته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم افتح علينا فتح العارفين بك يا فتاح يا عليم. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Starting now with chapter 15, lesson 15, we're going to get into how the verb works a little bit deeper. We've been talking about nouns a whole lot, and in fact our syntax indicator chart has been singularly focused on nouns. But today we're going to actually introduce cases, and that's, I'm just going to cases, if you will, or cases, so to speak, because at least in English, we don't use the word case except for nouns. We use moods for verbs. Regardless, syntax indicators, let's say syntax indicators for verbs. We're going to start getting into that right now. And lesson 15 is about that. To start, we want to clarify something and to reiterate something that has already been clarified several times, is that the past tense verb does not change. The past tense verb is built, so to speak. And in Arabic, we call that mabni. In fact, I think maybe that's a good time to share the screen here, and we can see what exactly we're talking about when we're talking about the past tense verb, right? So the past tense verb, al-fa'al al-madi, is mabni. And mabni means it does not change. So you have darasa, darasa, darasu, darasat, darasata, darasna, right? All the way through the second person and the first person. These do not change, and we already know these very well from the verb conjugations that we have. So if we look at that, we look at the verb conjugation chart for darasa, we can see that this column here, darasa, this column all the way down, past tense verb, that column is not going to change. And that is because the past tense verb is what is called, it is called mabni, right? Mabni. And mabni means, let's write that down here, mabni, right? Mabni. Mabni comes from a word that means to be built, or mabni actually means to be built. It's mabniyun, right? Mabniyun. That it is built. In other words, something that is built firmly, does not change, no matter where it comes in the sentence, no matter what precedes it, no matter what succeeds it, no matter what, it doesn't change. Those verbs stay as they are. But there is a second category of verbs called mu'arab, right? Mu'arab, mu'arabun. And mu'arab means that it changes, right? It changes. And this is for the al-fi'al al-mudara is mu'arab, right? Al-fi'al al-mudara is mu'arab, which means that the present tense verb changes, right? Depending on what comes before it, right? Depending on particles that come before it. And that's what lesson 15 is going to introduce us to today, inshallah. What are those particles? And so if we look here then at the column, the second column, present tense verb, these verbs are not constant. These verbs will change. Certain things will happen to them where they change, right? That means that certain particles will precede them, will come here on this right side of them, and when they appear, they're going to do some funky things to the verb, right? And so we're going to study that today, inshallah. So let's take this, actually. Let's take this. Yadrusu, all the way down. Let's take that. And in fact, I already have it written down here for the verb conjugation chart, right? The verb conjugation chart here for yadrusu shows that, well, there's two things to keep in mind here. Let's say, okay, so we're going to just assume that this is also present tense verb, right? Present tense verb for both of these, right? Present tense verb. And we're going to say yadrusu, right? Yadrusu and yadrusani, right? Yadrusuna, tadrusu, tadrusani, right? And yadrusna, right? Yadrusna. And then we have tadrusu, tadrusani, tadrusuna, right? This is all very familiar to everyone. And then you have tadrusina, tadrusani, and tadrusna, right? Tadrusna. And then last but not least, adrusu and nadrusu. So one of the first things that we notice about the present tense verb is that if it does not have a suffix to it, right? If the fa'il is not suffixed to it, right? Like yadrusu, right? Yadrusu. The fa'il is not suffixed. But yadrusani, the fa'il is suffixed. And you know that that's two. Two people did that. Two people are studying. Yadrusuna, right? The fa'il is suffixed, and that's the waw, right? The plural. And then here you have the fa'il is not suffixed, right? There's no suffix, okay, for tadrusu. Here there's a suffix, alif nun. Here there is a suffix that indicates the fa'il, the nun. Here there is no suffix, right? And so on and so forth. So what you notice about the verbs that are, the conjugations that are suffixed, is that there is some permutation of a nun. Yadrusani, yadrusuna, tadrusani, yadrusna, tadrusani, tadrusuna, tadrusina, tadrusani, tadrusna, right? And then and so, and if it doesn't have a suffix, then you just have a dhamma, right? There's a dhamma that is the syntax indicator. So here the syntax indicator for yadrusu is the dhamma. Here, the syntax indicator for yadrusani is the nun. And here it's the nun. And here is the dhamma. And here is the nun, right? And here it's the nun, right? And here the syntax indicator is a dhamma, right? And here the syntax indicator is a nun. And here the syntax indicator is a nun. And here the syntax indicator is, you guessed it, a nun, right? And here the syntax indicator is a nun. And here the syntax indicator is a nun. Here the syntax indicator is a dhamma. And here the syntax indicator is a dhamma. So you have either, and this is all in the marfu'a state. All of these are marfu'a, right? All of these are considered marfu'a, right? So all of these here, all of these verbs, this category, right? All of these are considered marfu'a, right? They're in the marfu'a state. So what happens with the verbs? You have, let me see here. We can go back to our trusty grammar reference guide. And you'll notice with the grammar reference guide, you have the marfu'at, the mansubat, the majrurat, and the majzumat, right? So basically, a verb can be marfu'a. A noun and a verb can be marfu'a. A noun and a verb can be mansub. Only nouns are majrur, and only verbs are majzum, which we're going to get into today. That third case for the verbs is majzum. So basically, for nouns, you have marfu'a, mansub, and majrur. For verbs, you have marfu'a, mansub, and majzum for verbs. And these are for present tense verbs. Past tense verbs do not apply to this whole thing because past tense verbs do not change. So the present tense verb will be either marfu'a, like here, the fi'l mudara. See that? The fi'l mudara is marfu'a, yadrusu, right? Yadrusu. Or it can be mansub, right? It can be mansub, and I don't have anything here indicating that for the fi'l mudara. Or it can be medzum. I should add an example here, but or it can be medzum, and you can get that with you can see here lam yadrus, right? Or udrus, right? Okay. So those are the divisions of the fi'al mudara, right? Marfu', mansub, and majzoom. Okay. If you look at the second page of this chart, that's where we're going to spend most, a lot of time today engaging the second page of this chart. You have the present tense verb on this side, and you have the noun on this side. The fi'al mudara is here, the ism is here, and we're going to look at this chart and see what's going on, right? But before we do this, I want to go back to our original chart here and show you that all of this here is how the fi'al mudara looks, how the present tense verb looks when it is marfu'a, right? Marfu'a. And so let's say, we're going to say this here is the marfu'a, right? Actually, you know what? I'm going to be a little, let me do this here. And we're going to move this over. We'll move this over, and this is our marfu'a category, right? Marfu'a, okay? Let's make that a little bit bigger. Marfu'a, okay? So that's the marfu'a category. Here's the mansub category. And here is the majzoom category. Naam. And look, we're just doing this for present tense verbs. Past tense verbs do not follow this chart at all. They're built, they don't change. So what happens when you have a present tense verb that is preceded by certain particles? And we're going to get into what those particles are. The mansub particles, one of them is lam, right? Which means the negation of the future. And the majzoom, one of them is lam, right? Which means the negation of the past, right? So if I said yadrusu, that means he is studying. Lan yadrus means, lan yadrusa means he will not or he shall not study. When I say lam yadrus, that means he did not study. Okay, so this negates the future, this negates the past. And these are not the only particles. There are more particles, and we will get to those. But I just want to use these as opposites. He will not study, he did not study. One negates the future, lam negates the past. Lam negates the past. Okay, so if I take this then, and actually I should have copied this here as well. Okay, so I'm going to copy this here as well. And I'm going to copy it here as well. Oops. Okay, so what happens when len enters the picture, right? And we're going to assume that len, right? Len is written all the way down here, right? All the way down. Len. What happens when len gets here is that if the verb has no suffix, i.e. if the verb has no permutation of a noon at the end of it, then that dhamma, if it's marfu' with a dhamma, that dhamma is going to change into a fatha. Okay? So why don't we do that for all the verbs that we see that for? Here's the dhamma, it changes into a fatha. No dhamma there, no dhamma there. There's the dhamma that changes into a fatha. No dhammas here, the whole thing, no dhammas there except for here. Oh, something happened. Okay. Oh, I just didn't put the last one. Very weird. Okay, so here, that dhamma changed. No dhammas here. This is all noons. You get a dhamma there, that changes to a fatha. You get a dhamma there, that changes to a fatha. That's basically how len is going to treat, right, all of these words that are marfu'a with a dhamma. Lam is going to treat these words a little bit differently. So lam, right, you have lam here, and we're going to assume that lam is all the way, that this word lam here is all the way down. We're going to assume that lam is all the way down here, right? So when lam is there, it changes the dhamma into a sukoon. So basically, let's look for all the dhammas. There's a dhamma, change that to a sukoon, change that to a sukoon. Down here, change that to a sukoon, and change that to a sukoon, right? And we're done with everything that has a dhamma. It changes to a fatha if it's mansub. It changes to a sukoon if it is majzoom, right? All right. So that's what happens when there is no permutation of a noon. Now, what if there is a permutation of a noon and you had len here, right? Len here. Let's just put len, let's just put len so that it's very clear what's going on. Right? Oops. Okay, and let's just put lem here. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay. All right, so we're going to put lem right here. Okay. So what if there is a variation of the noon? What happens? When there's a variation of the noon, then len and lem do exactly the same thing. They get rid of the noons, right? They get rid of the noons. So the noon goes away. The kasra and the noon, the fatha and the noon goes away. But for this one, you put an alif. Lam yadrusu, lam yadrusu, right? And in fact, let's go one by one and show you what happens to each one of them. So lan yadrusa, the noon goes away. Lam yadrusa, same exact thing. Lan yadrusu, the noon goes away, you put an alif. Lam yadrusu, the noon goes away, you put an alif, right? Same thing. And then here there's no permutation of a noon. Here there's a noon, what happens? The noon's going to drop here. Here, the noon is going to drop there. Lan tadrusa, lam tadrusa. What happens? Okay, so then we go down to this noon here. Lan tadrusa and lam tadrusa. Again, lan tadrusu with an alif, lam tadrusu with an alif. And then here for you, female singular, lan tadrusina becomes lan tadrusi. And lam tadrusi. You just take the noon off. Lan tadrusa. Lam tadrusa. And then you come down here and you're done. Now, you might have noticed that I left this one alone and I left this one alone. I left this one alone and I left this one alone. So basically, for hunna and antunna, for both of those, female plurals, right? They are mabni. They are mabni, okay? Those are the only two of the fi'al mudara that are actually mabni, which means they do not change no matter what. They do not change no matter what. So here you see here for hunna, right? Hunna, you have yadrusna, lan yadrusna, lam yadrusna. It doesn't matter what precedes the female plural is not going to change, right? The female plural is not going to change. The same thing here for antunna, the female plural is tadrusna, that's marfu'a. Lan tadrusna, that's mansub, doesn't change. Lam tadrusna, that's majzoom, does not change. Okay, so those are the only exceptions, is the feminine plurals, third person and second person, right? They do not change for anything. But you can see now that everything else is going to change. So recap, the marfu'a state, which means the default state of the verb, right? This is the default state of the verb when nothing is messing around with it, nothing is touching it, is that you if it doesn't have a suffix at the end of it, then you're going to give it a dhamma. Yadrusu, yaktubu, yaqra'u, yajlisu, yaqifu, ya'idu. All of these have dhammas on them. And this, so that's when they don't have a noon. If they have a suffix, then that suffix is going to be some kind of a noon. right? It's going to be some kind of a noon, and that is in its marfu'a state, right? Yadrusani, yadrusuna. This is how the verb looks like when nothing precedes it. In terms of, when I say nothing, I mean none of these particles here, lam, lam, and a few other particles that we're going to cover, right? So if these particles do not precede the present tense verb, then the verb is in its default natural state, which is marfu'a, meaning it has a dhamma or some permutation of a noon. Okay? All right. Now, when a harf nasb comes in, when a harfu nasb, which means a particle of nasb, a particle that makes it mansub, comes in, then those dhammas, whatever was a dhamma in the marfu'a state, changes into a fatha, and whatever had a noon drops the noon. With one exception, the female plurals, second person and third person, right? Those are the only exceptions. They retain their noons. Yadrusna and tadrusna retain their noons. And that is when it's preceded by a harf nasb. The same thing with a harf jazm, a particle that makes the verb majzum, harfu jazm, right? So these particles are going to change the dhamma into a sukoon. Wherever you see a dhamma, or wherever you expect a dhamma, or wherever you do not see some permutation of a noon, then that is going to have a sukoon on the end of it, right? A sukoon. And if there is some version of a noon, some permutation, I've been using that word, of a noon, then that noon is going to drop. The lam is actually going to strip the verb away, strip the noon away from its verb, right? Strip the noon, which is suffixed, away. If you're talking about the masculine plurals, that noon will drop, but there will come an alif in its place. And the reason for that, there is a reason for that, right? The reason for that is that this alif is there to tell us that, whoa, 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 look at this wow. This wow is not part of the root. This wow is not part of the root word. But this wow is actually for masculine plurality, right? That's what this alif is telling us. It's the alif that points out that the wow is not part of the root. Here it's rather obvious, but in other verbs, it's not so obvious, and that alif is very helpful. So anyway, that noon drops, and it's replaced with an alif. And the only exception, as we said before, is hunna and antunna, right? The female plurals, right? And that basically is our is how the verbs will change. So you have marfu'a for the verbs, mansub for the verbs, and majzoom for the verbs, right? And this this obviously is different from how nouns behave, because nouns behave with a ya or an alif. The alif changes to a ya, or the wow changes to a ya, or a fatha changes to a kasra. They've got their own pattern that we've been drilling up until now. So what I would like to go back to now is this second page of your grammar reference guide, which shows how the ism is behaving and how the present tense verb is behaving as well, the fi'l mudara, right? So by way of review, the ism, and let's read this. Al-mahal means the placeholder. You guys see this word here? Mahal. Mahal means the placeholder, right? And here you have marfu'a, here you've got mansub, here you've got majroor, right? For the ism, marfu'a, mansub, majroor. For the verb, you have marfu'a, mansub, majzoom, right? Majzoom. Okay, so let's take the ism, and this should be very, very easy now. This should be review for sure. So this is singular, dual, and plural, right? Singular, dual, and plural. Marfu'a, mansub, majroor, right? Okay. Looking at this, you have the word mudarrisun, which is an ism. Mudarrisun, right? A teacher, mudarrisun. Mudarrisun in the marfu'a state is going to be mudarrisun, right? Mudarrisun, mudarrisani, and mudarrisuna, right? Mudarrisun, mudarrisani, mudarrisuna. We could do it like this, or we could do it down. Why don't we do it down? Okay, so we could do it marfu' mansub majroor for the singular. You have mudarrisun, mudarrisan, and mudarrisin, right? Mudarrisun, mudarrisan with an alif, mudarrisin. This is when it's a mubtada or a khabar or a fa'il. This here is when it's a maf'ul bihi, right? A direct object. This here is when it's mudaf ilay, or when it's an ism majroor, right? So we know this. Mudarrisun, mudarrisan, mudarrisin, that's when it's singular. You go dhamma, fatha, kasra, right? And you've seen this here on the, where is it? Where is it? I thought I had it. Yeah, there it is. The syntax indicators for the noun, muslimun, musliman, and muslimin. Muslimatun, muslimatan, muslimatin. That's all this is, right? Okay. So, mudarrisun, mudarrisan, mudarrisin. Here for the dual, you have mudarrisani. You add an ani here, ani, and that's marfu'a. That's when it's marfu'a, and that changes to mudarrisaini in the mansub and mudarrisaini, same thing, in the majroor, right? So mudarrisani becomes mudarrisaini, mudarrisaini. The alif becomes a ya in the mansub and the majroor. The alif, which is the natural state of the dual, the natural marfu'a state, that's when nothing is happening to it. But when it's a direct object, when it follows a preposition, when it's the second term of an idafa, then that alif is going to become a ya, right? Mudarrisan, mudarrisani, mudarrisaini, mudarrisaini. For the plural, you get mudarrisuna, mudarrisina, mudarrisina. The waw, mudarrisuna, becomes mudarrisina, mudarrisina. We know this, right? We know this. And so we've covered this already in this chart. If you're more familiar with this, you have muslimun, musliman, muslimin, muslimani, muslimaini, muslimuna, muslimina. Feminine, muslimatun, muslimatan, muslimatin, muslimatani, muslimataini. Muslimatun, muslimatin. Right? Muslimatun, muslimatin. Right? And then you have the broken plurals and whatnot. Okay, so this is all review, right? This is all review. We go back and now we look at the same categories almost. Marfu'a, right? Marfu'a. Mansub, and you have here mansub, but this is different. Majroor for the nouns and majzoom for the verbs. So how do the verbs behave? You have yadrusu, yadrusa, yadrus. When it's marfu'a, yadrusu. When it's mansub, like len, if len was here, then you say len yadrusa, len yadrusa. You see that? The dhamma changes to a fatha. And then when it's majzoom, if there was a lam here, it would be lam yadrus, right? Lam yadrus. So you have three different variations on the singular. Well, not the singular, but on whatever does not have a suffix noon, right? Three different variations of these. But whatever does have a suffix noon, you only have two variations. So you have yadrusani, which is marfu'a. Yadrusani, they too are teaching, or they too are studying, sorry. They too are studying, yadrusani, and that's when it's marfu'a. But when it's mansub or majzoom, they look exactly the same. Lan yadrusa, lam yadrusa, right? They look exactly the same. So in other words, the noon will drop in the dual. And the noon will drop as well in the plural. You have yadrusuna or tadrusuna, you want, if the second person. Yadrusuna, when it's in the marfu'a state, when it's in its default natural state, yadrusuna. If lan comes before it and it becomes mansub, it becomes lan yadrusu. If lam comes before it and it's mansub, then it majzoom with lam, then it's lam yadrusu. They look exactly the same. They look exactly the same. So this is another chart that reiterates what we did here by, look at this, lan yadrusa, lam yadrusa. They look exactly the same. Lan yadrusu, lam yadrusu, exactly the same. Any variation of a noon looks exactly the same. Even this one, it didn't even change from the marfu'a. Hunna didn't even change, so that's all the same. And then here, lan tadrusa, lan tadrusa. The noon drops and they look exactly the same. Tadrusuna becomes lan tadrusu, lam tadrusu, right? They look exactly the same. Tadrusina in the marfu'a, lan tadrusi, lam tadrusi. They look exactly the same. Tadrusani, antuma, you both. Tadrusani in its marfu'a state, lan tadrusa, lam tadrusa. They look exactly the same. And the feminine plural for second person, antunna, you guys, you girls, right? You women, tadrusna, lan tadrusna, lam tadrusna. It doesn't even change because it's feminine plural, right? The only thing that changes between these two is when you do not have a noon attached to it. In that case, the dhamma becomes a fatha when it's mansub, and it becomes a sukoon when it's majzoom, right? And I'm trying to present this in many different ways so that we can, so that it's all repeated and drilled at the same time. There's another way of reading this chart that I think is very helpful. I think, hopefully, you can tell me if it's not in office hours, but you have column number 1 here, column number 2 here, column number 3, and then 4 and 5 and 6. 6 columns, right? And here, those columns are represented here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So column number 1 here corresponds to this column number 1. And column number 2 here corresponds to this row number 2, not column, row number 2. And column number 3 is represented by row number 3 here, and so on and so forth. So let's take these one by one. So column number 1 is yadrusu, yadrusa, yadrus, right? So you can find this here as yadrusu, lan yadrusa, and lam yadrus, right? But I've got some more information here. I said yadrusu is a fi'al mudara, it's a present tense verb, marfu'a with a dhamma, marfu'a bid dhamma, right? It's marfu'a with a dhamma. Here, lan yadrusa, yadrusa is a fi'al mudara that is mansub bil fatha. It's mansub with a fatha. Lam yadrus is a fi'al mudara, a present tense verb, that is majzoom bis sukun. It's majzoom with a sukun, right? And so on and so forth. Here you say yadrusani is a fi'al mudara. Yadrusani is a present tense verb that is marfu'a with what? Thubut nun. Bi thubut nun. Marfu'a bi thubut nun means that it is marfu'a by establishing the presence of the noon. Bithubut and nun. Thubut means to be firmly established. So that is how we know, in other words, that's a syntax indicator that it's marfu'a, is that the noon is there, right? So if the noon is there, it is marfu'a by the establishment of it is marfu'a in that case. It's in its default natural state. But then with lan yadrusa, I would say that it's a fi'al mudara, it's a present tense verb that is mansub because of lan, it's mansub bihadfin nun. How do I know it's mansub? By casting off the nun. Hadfin nun means to throw away the nun, right? Whereas thubut nun means to establish the nun. Okay? And then lam yadrusa, it's a fi'al mudara, it's a present tense verb that is majzoom because you have lam now, which is a harf of jazm. Majzoom by casting off the noon, by bihadf noon. How do I know that it's majzoom? I don't see a noon there. The noon has been cast off, so it must be majzoom. And I couldn't say lam yadrusani, right? Because lam is going to affect that verb. It's going to change that verb. Same thing for yadrusuna now. Fi'al mudara, it's a fi'al mudara, it's a present tense verb that is marfu'a in its default natural state. Bithubutin nun. How do I know? Because the nun is established. It's marfu'a by the establishment of the nun, right? Lan yadrusu is a fi'al mudara that is mansub, right? It's mansub. And how do I know it's mansub? Because of lan. Lan is one of these particles of nasb. And we're going to get into the particles, I promise you. It's mansub by casting off the noon, by taking the noon away. And I put an alif in its place because it is the masculine plural, right? Masculine plural, you put the alif in its place. And it's just like well, I changed all of this, but it's just like the past tense verb, right? The past tense verb. If we look at the past tense verb, then we see in the past tense verb you have this alif, right? This alif in the past tense, right? The past tense verb, you have this alif, right? So we've noticed this alif before with the waw. So that comes again in the present tense, mansub and majzoom, mansub and majzoom. Okay, and then here we have the lam yadrusu. It is a fi'al mudara, a present tense verb that is majzoom, because of lam, which is a harf jazm. Majzoom, how do I know it's majzoom? Because the syntax indicator indicates that the noon is not there. Hadf al-noon. It's majzoom by casting off, throwing away, discarding the noon, right? And that then is how we follow this chart here, this chart. Now, when we get here though, when we get here to the nouns, we see marfu'a, mansub, majroor now, majroor, with the nouns. And 4, we take column number 4, and that corresponds to row number 4 here. So the word in column number 4, you have mudarrisun, mudarrisan, mudarrisin. So we're going to see here mudarrisun, mudarrisan, and mudarrisin, right? You're going to see mudarrisin there. So all 3 of these are represented in this row. Mudarrisun, right? Mudarrisun. You're going to say, here we said yadrusu was a fi'al mudara. All of these, yadrusu, yadrusani, yadrusuna, yadrusa, yadrusa, yadrusu, yadrus, yadrusa, yadrusu, all these are fi'al mudara. That's all they're called. It's called a fi'al mudara. But here, when you have an ism, the ism is going to be called something else. It's going to be called mubtada, or khabar, or a fa'il, or a na'ib fa'il, or an ismu kana, or khabar inna. You see all of these categories, you know where I'm getting these categories from? Mubtada, khabar, fa'il, na'ib fa'il, ismu kana, khabar inna. You see all these categories? I'm getting these categories from our grammar reference guide. The first page, we're on the grammar reference guide. The first page of the grammar reference guide, when we look here and we look at all of the marfu'at, right? All of these nouns, they're mostly nouns. All of these marfu'at, you have the mubtada, you have the khabar, you have the fa'il, you have the na'ib fa'il, you have ismu kana, khabar inna, and so on and so forth, right? So that's where these categories are what shows up in this second page, right? So the second page now is going to tell you that I should have made this bigger a long time ago. I'm sorry, I should have made this bigger. I hope that you are not squinting. Do we have anyone online? I don't know if anyone's online right now. Oh, we have a couple people online. Alhamdulillah. I thought I was talking to myself. Okay, very good. So you should have asked me to make it bigger if you couldn't read it. But here we've got the mudarrisun, right? Mudarrisun is either going to be a mubtada, it's going to start the sentence, or a khabar, or a fa'il, right? And those are the 3 that you know now. And you also know ismu kana. So you know these 4, right? These 4. Mubtada, khabar, fa'il, and ismu kana. You know those. So if it's any of these, it's going to show up as mudarrisun, right? Mudarrisun. And you're going to say mubtada, marfu'a with a dhamma, or khabar, marfu'a with a dhamma. Fa'il, it's marfu'a, the syntax indicator is a dhamma. Ismu kana, it's marfu'a with a dhamma, right? Now, we're still in number 4, right? Column number 4. If it becomes mudarrisan, if there's an alif there with 2 fathas, mudarrisan, then you're going to say, oh, that's maf'ul bihi, and it's mansub with a fatha. And you can see now how the dhamma changes to a fatha. Whereas here, yes, in the verbs, the dhamma also changes to a fatha, but it also changes to a sukoon with the verbs, right? Dhamma changes to a fatha, changes to a sukoon. But here with the nouns, dhamma changes to a fatha and it changes to a kasra. Okay, so there are variations between we have to separate in our minds the ism from the fi'al. The ism behaves a certain way, the fi'al behaves a different way. Okay, and this chart is, if you master this chart, you've mastered it. If you know this chart, you've mastered the art. And inshallah, we're going to, through the readings, we're going to get really good at this, inshallah. So mudarrisan, we know that it's maf'ul bihi, and we also know khabar kana. Khabar kana, right? We also know khabar kana, this word here, khabar kana, that we know how it behaves. Khabar kana behaves just like this. It's mansub. And so does the maf'ul bihi. Don't worry about any of this other stuff. We're going to get introduced to them in time. But for now, both maf'ul bihi and khabar kana, or khabar laysa, khabar asbaha, kana and her sorority, kana and her sisters, they are going to behave like this. They're going to have fathas. That dhamma is going to change into a fatha. So we're going to say maf'ul bihi mansub with a fatha, bil fatha, or khabar kana mansub bil fatha, right? Okay. Now what happens if it's mudarrisin? Mudarrisin, we know that, okay, now we're dealing with an ism majroor, an ism that follows a preposition that is majroor with a kasra. Majroor bil kasra. Makhfood, majroor, these are synonymous. Ismun majroor, majroor bil kasra. Or mudaf ilay, second term of idafa, it is mudaf ilay, majroor bil kasra, right? And so on and so forth, with column 5 and column 6. Now let's look at column 5 real quick. Mudarrisani, mudarrisaini, mudarrisaini. That's the dual, right? Two teachers, two teachers, two teachers. Mudarrisani is when it's marfu'a. Mudarrisaini, it's mansub. Mudarrisaini, it's majroor. So looking at row number 5, mudarrisani, it's going to look like that, which is its default natural state. Mudarrisani, we're going to say, oh, that's a mubtada. Or no, that's a khabar. Or no, that's a fa'il. Or no, that's ismu kana. All of these cases we're going to say marfu'a. But what is it marfu'a with? In the singular, it was marfu'a with what? With a dhamma, right? Marfu'a bid dhamma. But the natural state here of the dual is that it's marfu'a with what? You have ani, it's marfu'a with an alif. It's marfu'a with an alif. Not the noon. The noon doesn't change. The noon doesn't make it. Look at this. Mudarrisani, mudarrisaini, mudarrisaini. You're not just going to throw off that noon. Why don't you throw off that noon? Because nouns don't behave like that. Nouns don't behave like that, where you just cast off a noon just because it's mansub or majroor. What behaves like that? What noon behaves like that? The noon of the present tense verb. If it's mansub, you take it off. If it's majzoom, you take it off. It's gone, right? The noon behaves like that with the present tense verb. But with the ism, the noon stays the same. Mudarrisani, mudarrisaini, mudarrisaini, right? There's a noon with a kasra in all three of these. Look at this column here. Look at our column. Mudarrisani, mudarrisaini, and mudarrisaini. You see this? Mudarrisani, mudarrisaini, mudarrisaini. So where is the change in all three of these? Where is the change? The only change is that our alif, which is the default, which is marfu'a, it's marfu'a with an alif. Now it's mansub with a ya. Or now it's majroor with a ya. You see what I'm saying? So, and this should be reviewed by now. It really should be reviewed because we've done this a few times. So mudarrisani becomes mudarrisaini, and when it's mudarrisaini, we say, oh, that's a maf'ul bihi, or that's khabar kana, if it's mansub. So we say it's maf'ul bihi or khabar kana mansub with a ya, mansub bil ya. Or here, mudarrisaini, again, same word, mudarrisaini, mudarrisaini. But it just so happens to follow a preposition. That's why we call it an ism majroor. And it's majroor bil ya. Or it's the second term of idafa, and it's majroor bil ya. We say mudaf ilay, majroor bil ya, right? And the noon is irrelevant. The noon doesn't make any the noon doesn't change. The same thing here for, guess what? The plural, right? And we're just looking at the masculine right now. The feminine, basically all of the changes between because this is all just masculine, right? But the feminine is represented here. And we can see all of that. We can see all these changes. We can see the alif changes into a ya, dhamma changes to a fatha, changes to a kasra. The dhamma here changes into a kasra. Muslimatun, muslimatin. Whereas muslimuna, muslimina, right? So you guys need to just review this to see what happens with the feminines. All right. So for the sixth column here and the sixth row, mudarrisuna, right? Mudarrisuna, we say, okay, that's a mubtada, khabar, fa'il, ismu kana. It's one of those four, right? And we're going to learn the other ones later. And it's marfu'a, it's in its default natural state with a waw, with a waw. And why am I saying a waw and not a noon? Because look at the difference between mudarrisuna here and mudarrisina here and mudarrisina here. The only difference in this column here is that the waw changes into a ya. That's it. No other difference. The noons all stay the same, and they all have fathas here, where they have kasras here. In the dual, they all have kasras, but in the plural, they all have fathas. So the noon is irrelevant. The noon is not going to change. The change is really with the letter before the noon. The waw changes to a ya. Here you have the alif changes into a ya. That's all. Dhamma changes to a fatha, changes to a kasra. Alif changes to a ya. Waw changes to a ya. That's basically the whole chart for nouns, right? So we're going to say mudarrisuna is a mubtada, khabar, or fa'il, or an ismu kana, and it's marfu'a with a waw. Here, the mudarrisina, it's a maf'ul bihi, or it's khabar kana, and it's mansub by that waw changing into a ya. So we say mansub bil ya. And the same thing here for mudarrisina. If it follows a preposition, we call it ism majroor, and then we say the case is that it's majroor with a ya, bil ya. Ism majroor bil ya. And then mudaf ilay here, mudaf ilay, is if it's the second term of idafa, it's called a mudaf ilay, and it's also majroor with a ya, right? So that is the difference then between how the present tense verb behaves and how the past tense verb behaves. And I promised you guys that I would show you or share with you some of the other particles, because we only dealt with len and lam, right? So why don't we do that now? So these are huruf al-nasb, right? And these are huruf al-jazm, right? Huruf al-nasb and huruf al-jazm. Get some room here. Huruf al-nasb and huruf al-jazm. Are there any questions before we do this? All right, so you have len. Okay, so let's n, len, k, hatta. We have a question. Li, right? And there's a couple more that are a little less common. Sorry if you've ever already answered this. Wondering if you have ijaza in tajweed. That is a question that is not relevant to the lesson. You may email me private questions at a later time, but that is not relevant to so both questions that were just asked, they could be forwarded to the course administrator, inshallah. So an, lan, kay, hatta, and li, right? That's enough for now. And then another question here. Okay. And then for the huruf and jazm, you have lam, lamma, li, right? Also, and la. Okay. So basically, so what do these mean? What do these mean? And our this table here, we're pretty much destroying it, just doing all kinds of stuff to it right now. So what do these mean? And means that or to in the infinitive sense, right? So let's okay. Len negates future. K in order to, hatta in order to, li in order to. Okay. Then you have lam negates the past. Lamma negates past until now, right? So sort of like X has not verbed yet, right? So it negates the past until now. Li is the imperative, right? Imperative command. And la is the prohibitive, right? Okay. And when we find these, and we're not going to get into the jazm so much today. We're going to focus more on the mansub because that's what lesson 15 focuses on, right? So those are the. So if I say something like uhibbu an adrus, right? I like to study. I would say uhibbu an adrusa, right? With a fatha, and this an means to, right? This an means to. But if I change the subject, uhibbu an tadrusi, that means, okay, so this means I love to study. I love that you study. And I'm speaking to one female, I'm addressing one female, right? Tadrusi. Because it should be tadrusina. Tadrusina. But an is here, and because an is there, I'm going to take off the noon, right? Now it's mansub, and it doesn't mean to anymore. It doesn't mean to anymore, right? The infinitive to, right? The infinitive, it means that. And the reason it means that is because the subjects switch, right? I like, right? I like. So here you have, okay, my computer's freezing up on me here. Here you have I like, uhib, I like that I study. I like that I study, right? Which means I like to study because the subject did not switch. But if the subject switches, I like or I love that you study, right? I would love that you study or something like that. I would love you to study right now, okay? And that's when it means that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I had a verse in my mind, but I lost it. No. So let's take a look at the book. Actually, let's take a look at the book and see if we have covered what we needed to cover. While I think of a verse, inshallah. So all this we covered, and this is the chart that we covered in depth. So here is, and this here is then, yeah, and then Kayla. So you have K and Kayla. So I said K, right? And you also have K, or you can say K la, and in order to or in order not to. So basically it's not K la that's doing it, it's still K, right? La is not doing anything, it's just negating, right? Negating the meaning. But K is really what's at work here. That's why I didn't put the, I didn't put that, but we'll leave that there, K and K la. So everything is pretty much straightforward. So I'm trying to figure out if I missed anything. Yeah, so the book, there is one thing that I would like to mention, and that is that the book here, with respect to len, the book says that len is emphatic. It means that I shall not study, with an exclamation point. And where is this notion coming from? It's not correct. It's not accurate. Len just simply negates the future. Because if you have len that's emphatic, that means I shall not study with an exclamation point, then how do you say I will not study with a period? There's no way to say it except with len, right? Len is the only way to negate the future. So you can't say that len is for emphasis and we don't really have anything else that is not for emphasis. It makes no sense, right? And the reason that that's the case is because len is not used by modern day Arabs. And so whenever it's used, it's sort of like a double take. What did you say? Len. You must really mean it, because it's never used. But again, we don't measure our language by what modern day Arabs say or do not say. Len is how we just negate the future. That's all. There's no emphasis or anything like that. So I want you to ignore that point in the book. And yeah, that's the chapter. That's lesson 15. So the verses that I have in mind, all the verses that I'm thinking about, they involve vowels, and vowels are treated a little bit differently. So no verses are coming to mind right now that. Oh, so there is one. بل يريد الإنسان ليفجر أمامه. Right? Rather, the human being desires liyafjura amama, desires to, and the li is, I said it was in order to, but sometimes it also just means to. Okay, so rather the human being desires to sow or to do evil in the time in front of him, amamahu, in the time in the life he has before him, right? And look at li, what it does to the verb liyafjura, right? Do you not see that, liyafjura? So here it would have been yafjuru, but because the lam is attached to it, then because the lam precedes it, then that dhamma changes into a fatha, right? And also, obviously, you guys have the example of lam yalid, right? Lam yalid wa lam yulad. And now you can understand why this has a sukoon on it, because otherwise, without lam, it would have been yuladu and yalidu. Yalidu, yuladu. But because lam is there, that dhamma is going to change to a sukoon, right? Lam yalid wa lam yulad, right? And there are other particles that will do this as well, right? La taqnatu من روح الله, right? لا تقنطوا من روح الله. Do not despair of the mercy of Allah. Rawh is mercy, right? It's not ruh, it's rawh, and rawh is mercy. Do not despair of the mercy of Allah. Look at this word here, taqnutu, right? Taqnutu. It would have been taqnutuna, right? Taqnutuna. But because the la is there, which prohibits, do not, then that noon drops and it's replaced with an alif, la taqnutu min rawhillah, right? And there are many examples that will follow. We're going to start seeing these patterns now in the reading as we do the reading. So I think that's a brief, we really unpacked on you guys today. But inshallah, with that, you should be able to understand lesson 15 very easily, inshallah. And this is a lesson that you will want to come back to again and again and again in order to really get it. The difference between how nouns behave and how the present tense verb behaves. All right. So why don't we take questions if there are questions, and if not, then we can go ahead and see about our reading. We can approach the reading, inshallah. Are there any questions? Yeah, I have a big problem with my cursor right now, and I think it's because my my computer is being overly used, or overly stimulated, I guess you can say. I don't know why that's the case, but okay. So let's go to the reading then, inshallah. I'm sorry for this, but I cannot use my cursor for some reason. Which is going to make it very difficult not to be able to use your cursor. How do I do this? All right. If I were to restart my computer, it would take a good 5-6 minutes, and maybe wise to do that, but we'll see if we can follow along. If you have questions, because I cannot select anything with the cursor behaving like this. If you have questions, please unmute yourself and ask your question. All right. But we're on page, let's see here. Kaaba. Bayt al-Maqdis, we read this. I'm sorry, I cannot choose. You're asking questions, and I was able to make it, I think. You'll have to unmute yourself. I cannot read anything because I can't really control my cursor right now. So if you don't mind unmuting yourself and asking your question, that would be much better. It's the only way that we can really get questions right now. I'm really sorry for the technical difficulties, but my computer is not responding well right now. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. This is what is known as the rotating ball of death. Okay, 29, 30. Finally, أحسن القصص, the most beautiful of stories. The most beautiful of stories. So رؤيا عجيبة, right? رؤيا عجيبة, رؤيا عجيبة means that, a beautiful or a wonderful or a splendid vision. A splendid vision. كان يوسف ولدا صغيرا. كان يوسف ولدا صغيرا. And my question is, why is it waladan? Why is it waladan? كان يوسف ولدا صغيرا. I don't think that you are able to, I think I know what's going on right now. You are unable to unmute yourself. If that is the case, then I am very sorry. This is going to be, you're just going to have to follow along. Hold on. You just have to follow along. So, كان يوسف ولدا صغيرا. Waladan, the reason it's waladan, the reason it's mansub, in other words, the reason why it's not waladun is because waladan is khabar kana. And khabar kana is mansub. And it's an ism, so it's going to be mansub with fathas because it's singular. Waladan. Kana Yusufu waladan saghiran. Yusuf was a young boy. Wakana lahu. Let me see here. Unmute all. Okay. Finally. My cursor is starting to behave okay now. So Sumaya, do you want to, are you able to participate?
Actually, no. I'm actually about to find out. I'm about to leave the house.
Oh, okay. No problem.
But
Okay. So I'm going to continue then. Okay. So, كان يوسف ولدا صغيرا وكان له 11 أخا, and he had 11 brothers, right? Now the numbers after 3 to 10 is, you have the word akhan here, which is actually singular. So after 3 to 10, you say 11 brother, or 27 brother, or 1,356 brother, right? But between 3 to 10, you say brothers, right? So you have 7 brothers, 41 brother, right? And that's how the numbers work. Numbers are their own beast, right? Numbers require a very 2 or 3 lessons to get through. They're not very easy. They are very easy, but it's just a lot of rules. وَكَانَ يُوسُفُ غُلَامًا جَمِيلًا. And Yusuf was a beautiful young boy, right? A beautiful young boy. And why is it غُلَامًا? Again, because it is the khabar of kana. Yusufu is the ism kana, and غُلَامًا is the khabar of kana. And the khabar of kana is mansub. The ism of kana is just like the mubtada, not mansub, it's marfu'. وَكَانَ يُوسُفُ غُلَامًا ذَكِيًّا. And Yusuf was an intelligent young boy. وَكَانَ أَبُوهُ يَعْقُوبُ يُحِبُّهُ أَكْثَرَ مِنْ جَمِيعِ إِخْوَتِهِ. And his father, Yaqub, and here you have kana and a present tense verb here. Present tense verb. Alhamdulillah, the cursor is working again. So his father, Yaqub, used to love him. Used to love him. Akthara, more than, akthara min, right? Min is how we say, the superlative, af'ala min is how we do the comparison. More than all of his brothers. Jami'i ikhwatihi, and this is an idafa, right? Jami'i ikhwatihi, all of his brothers. ذات ليلة رأى يوسف رؤيا عجيبة, right? And it should be رؤيا. I don't know where the other tanween is, but رؤيا عجيبة. ذات ليلة means one night, right? It's the way we say once upon a time, or once upon a night, once upon one day, a long time ago, right? One night, رأى يوسف, Yusuf saw رؤيا عجيبة. رؤيا عجيبة. Look at this hamza. Why do you think it's sitting on a waw? It's sitting on a waw because it follows a dhamma. right? And the Dhamma overtakes the Sukoon. The Dhamma is stronger than the Sukoon, right? So it's going to sit on a Waw. It's going to take its clue from the Dhamma and it's going to sit itself on a Waw. This goes back to last week's lesson. So Yusuf saw a wondrous vision. رَأَى أَحَدَ عَشَرَ كَوْكَبًا وَرَأَى الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ كُلٌّ يَسْجُدُ لَهُ. He saw 11 kawkaban means any celestial body is a kawkab. Right? A star is considered a kawkab. A planet is considered a kawkab. So he saw 11 stars, right? وَرَأَى الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ, and he saw the sun and the moon. كُلٌّ يَسْجُدُ لَهُ. All of these, right? كُلٌّ, all of these, يَسْجُدُ لَهُ, were prostrating to him, right? تعجب يوسف الصغير كثيرا. Yusuf, the young Yusuf, right? The young Yusuf, تعجب, was amazed, or was very, very, was amazed a lot. كثيرا, was amazed a whole bunch. وما فهم هذه الرؤيا, and he did not understand. ما فهم, he did not understand هذه الرؤيا, this vision. And what do we know about the gender of the word ru'ya? We know that it is feminine, right? Because of hadihi. Hadihi is feminine. Hadihi ar-ru'ya. كيف تسجد الكواكب? How do the stars or the planets tasjudu? How do they prostrate? وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ? How do the stars or the planets and the sun and the moon prostrate? لِرَجُلٍ, to a man. How do they prostrate to a man? ذهب يوسف الصغير إلى أبيه يعقوب. So Yusuf, the young Yusuf, the young boy Yusuf, ذهب, went to abihi, and you have a ya here, right? As opposed to abuhu, or as opposed to abahu, and that's because ab is one of the 6 nouns, right? Abu, aba, abi, right? So it's an ism majrur because it follows the word ila, yadhabu ila abi bakr, right? Ila abi bakr. So we have here yadhabu, dhahaba Yusuf ila, so that means this is an ism majrur, and it's got to be majrur with a ya. Ila abihi, he went to his father Yaqub, wa haka lahu هذه الرؤيا العجيبة, and he narrated, or he related to him, this wondrous vision. قال يا أبتي, he said, O my father, O my dear father, يا أبتي, إني رأيت أحد عشر كوكبا, I have seen 11 stars, والشمس والقمر, or 11 planets, and the sun and the moon, رأيتهم لي ساجدين. And this is a verse from we're actually reading the Quran now. This is a verse from the Quran. قال يا أبتي إني رأيت أحد عشر كوكبا والشمس والقمر رأيتهم لي ساجدين. I saw them prostrating to me. I saw them to me prostrating, right? So the question is, why is this رأيتهم, right? رأيتهم. I saw them. Them refers to what? 11 planets, a sun, a moon. All of these. All of these things together, they make up a plural, and that plural is irrational. And we said that we treat irrational plurals as singular feminine, right? And we said that that's our default. That's what we usually do. So he could have said, رَأَيْتُهَا li sajidin, singular feminine, رَأَيْتُهَا. But he didn't. He said, رَأَيْتُهُمْ. So he used a masculine plural for rational beings, hum, to describe irrational plurals, right? And we said that you can do that if you mean to personify, or if you mean to exalt something, or if you have some sort of rhetorical value that you're giving to these objects, and you're making these objects into something that is absolutely possessed of grandeur. So here he uses the plural, and you'll see that you can use either the plural or you can use the singular feminine. You can go both ways. It's not wrong. It's just that the default of the Arabs was to treat these irrational plurals as singular feminine. وَكَانَ أَبُوهُ يَعْقُوبُ نَبِيًّا, and his father Yaqub was Nabiyyan, and it's mansub. Why is this mansub? Because it's the khabar of kana. Again, the khabar of kana. وَكَانَ أَبُوهُ يَعْقُوبُ نَبِيًّا, right? فَرِحَ يَعْقُوبُ بِهَذِهِ الرُّؤْيَا كَثِيرًا. Yaqub, fariha, Yaqub was overjoyed, بِهَذِهِ الرُّؤْيَا, with this vision, kathiran, a lot. He was very overjoyed with this vision. وَقَالَ بَارَكَ اللَّهُ لَكَ يَا يُوسُفُ, and he said, may Allah place the barakah for you, or may Allah place the barakah in you, may Allah bless you, O Yusuf. فَسَيَكُونُ لَكَ شَأْنٌ, فَسَيَكُونُ لَكَ شَأْنٌ, for you will, sayakun, which puts it in the future, you will, and then laka, right? Well, not you, but here's the you, right? Laka. Laka means you have, right? You have. Laka, right? Laka. You have. The lam is for possession. We know that, right? It's when a human being possesses another human being in a relationship, or a human being possesses something that is not human, right? So laka means you have, but it's in the future because he says sa. So you will have. There will be for you. There will be for you, or you shall have, or you will have sha'nun. You will have great stature. You will have a great stature, a great future, or something like that. Sha'n is something of worth, something of weight. هذه الرؤيا بشارة بعلم ونبوة. This vision, هذه الرؤيا, this vision is a bashara. It is a bashara. It is a blank. بعلم ونبوة. It is a blank of knowledge and prophecy. It is a blank with knowledge and prophecy. In other words, it is a prophecy, or it is a good tiding, glad tiding, which is one of the words that only Muslims use, glad tiding, right? It is a glad tiding of knowledge and prophecy. وَقَدْ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَى جَدِّكَ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed your grandfather Ishaq, your grandfather Ishaq. وَقَدْ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَى جَدِّكَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ, and your father has, and where am I getting has? From qad, plus a past tense. You have qad with a past tense, and it creates the I think it was called the pluperfect tense when we covered that, the pluperfect, right? God has, right? God has blessed your grandfather Ishaq, and God has blessed your grandfather Ibrahim. Okay? Your great grandfather Ibrahim. وَإِنَّهُ يُنْعِمُ عَلَيْكَ, and he يُنْعِمُ عَلَيْكَ, and this is a present tense verb, right? يُنْعِمُ عَلَيْكَ وَيُنْعِمُ عَلَى آلِ يَعْقُوبَ, that he, and the word here is for blessing, right? But is it present tense or is it future tense? Remember when we covered future tense and we said the context will guide us to knowing, if the excuse me, if the context is clear, right? If the context is clear, then we don't need the sa, right? We don't need the sawfa, that the present tense verb is enough, right? So Allah will bless you and bless the family of Yaqub, right? He will bless you and bless the family of Yaqub. And here Yaqub is in this story, right? He's this this story that's sort of, it's I guess you can call it, I mean, I don't want to call it historical fiction, but it's a storybook for children, in which the details are being fleshed out, right, by at the author's discretion. So Yaqub is telling him in this line that Allah will bless you, and He will bless the family of Yaqub, my family, right, through you. وَكَانَ يَعْقُوبُ شَيْخًا كَبِيرًا. And Yaqub was an old, right? It means big with objects, but with people it means old. An old sheikh. He was an old man, right? He was an old man. And the reason that shaykhan is mansub like this with two fathas, why do you think that's the case? Because this is the khabar of kana, right? Kana Yaqubu shaykhan kabiran. وَكَانَ يَعْرِفُ طَبَائِعَ النَّاسِ. And كَانَ يَعْرِفُ, now we have kana plus a present tense verb. It means he would verb, or he used to verb, or he was verbing, right? وَكَانَ يَعْرِفُ طَبَائِعَ النَّاسِ. And he used to know the blanks, and this is a plural, طَبَائِعَ, it sounds like masajid, rasail, right? Sounds like a plural. He used to know the blanks of people, right? He used to know the blanks of people. So what do you think the blanks are? The blanks here, he's telling him that you're going to be blessed, that you are a prophet, you are the, that this is glad tidings and all of this. But this is a very difficult word to guess through context. Taba'a. We may know this word through a different word, right? And that word is tabi'a, right? Tabi'a means, oh, it's so great when the cursor is working. Tabi'a means nature, right? Nature. So taba'a is related to this, right? Taba'a, right? Which is basically the plural of taba, right? Taba. So taba and taba'a, right? It means, and it has to do with nature, right? So what do you think it means here? That he used to know the blanks of people, and tabi'a means nature. So taba'a means the disposition of people. He used to know he used to be a very good judge of character, right? This is the taba'a of people, right? He knew people's dispositions very well. He knew people's personalities very well. He could read your personality. وَكَانَ يَعْرِفُ كَيْفَ يَغْلِبُ الشَّيْطَانُ. And he used to know how, كَيْفَ يَغْلِبُ الشَّيْطَانُ. We haven't seen this verb for a very long time. We saw it in the first couple of stories. But يَغْلِبُ, he used to know how shaitan يَغْلِبُ, overcomes, how shaitan wins, right? How he succeeds. وكيف يغلب الشيطان وكيف يلعب الشيطان بالإنسان وكيف يلعب الشيطان بالإنسان, and how shaitan would play with mankind, right? And how shaitan would play with mankind. فقال يا ولدي, and so he said, O my son, يا ولدي, لا تخبر بهذه الرؤيا أحدا من إخوتك, right? لا تخبر, look at that. I wish someone was online with me right now. No one is online with me now. I'm talking to myself right now. And I so wish that I could ask the people who could have been online why this has a sukoon on it. I wish I could ask that question. But I can't. So I'll answer the question that I cannot ask. لا تخبر بهذه الرؤيا أحدا. This sukoon tells me what about this la? That it's not merely negative. It doesn't just negate. It doesn't say, I do not study, or I am not studying. But this sukoon tells us about this verb that it is majzoom. And it is majzoom because of a particle, a harfu jazm, that came before it. And la, as a harfu jazm, can only mean one thing. It doesn't mean I do not. It means do not. Don't, right? So do not. It's prohibitive. It's not negative. Negative means he does not play, we do not eat, they do not drink, we do not lounge. It's telling us what we do not do. But the prohibitive tells us do not sit down, do not talk, do not raise your voice at me, do not drink right now, do not pray until sunset, all of that, right? So it's prohibiting. So here, the first one where I say I do not study, or do not, you do not study, la tadrusu, right? And here this is the difference here. This is the difference between the marfu'a and the majzoom, right? They're both la, right? We're going to say here la tadrusu, and here la tadrus. There's a big difference between these two, right? La tadrusu means you do not study. You are not studying. This means do not study. Okay, that's the difference. That's the difference. Same la, pronounced the same way, but this one, the first one here is called, and this is where we're going to get into. You don't have to memorize this. La nafiya, and this is la nahiya, right? This is negating la. It's a la that negates, merely negates, whereas this one is a la that prohibits, forbids, right? Okay, so he says la tukhbir with a sukun on it, la tukhbir. So it's majzoom, right? Majzoom. And we would say la tadrus, we would say fi'al mudara marfu'a bid-damma. And here we would say fi'al mudara majzoom bis-sukun, right? Just to keep that language fresh in our minds. لا تخبر بهذه الرؤيا أحدا من إخوتك. Do not inform with this vision, right? Anyone, and anyone here is maf'ul bihi. That's why it's mansub. Do not inform anyone of this vision. Do not inform anyone from your brothers, min ikhwatika, of this vision. Do not inform anyone from your brothers of this vision, right? So you might be wondering, why is this ba there? Because I don't use it in English. I would say, do not inform anyone of your vision, right? Of, and ba does not mean of, right? Ba means by or with or in, but it doesn't mean of. Well, this is how languages behave. Prepositions are characteristic to the source and the target language. They don't always get translated. And sometimes you'll have a preposition in the source language that does not exist in the translation in the target language, and vice versa. You have no preposition in the source language that must have a preposition in the target language. And that's because prepositions are particular to their own respective languages, right? So, akhbara bih, right? Akhbara, he informed, comes with bih. It's a verb that comes with its own preposition. No matter what, you're going to have akhbara bih, right? Akhbara bih. You're going to always see that. The ba is just part of the verb, right? It's not attached to the verb, but it's always going to follow the verb. That's just the way this verb behaves, right? It comes with its own preposition, right? Like this. In English, we say, I saw him. But can I say, I stare him? Can I say that? Right? Can't say that. because it comes with its own preposition, at him. I stare at him, right? And I can't say I saw at him. Do you see what I'm saying? So prepositions are, if you've mastered a language with its prepositions, or if you've mastered usage with prepositions, then you've got the language down. You've really mastered it. And that is the difference between proficiency and eloquence, right? Proficiency, you'll get along. People will understand you. But eloquence is when you use these prepositions, in this regard, you use it in the correctly. لا تخبر بهذه الرؤيا أحدا من إخوتك فإنهم يحسدونك ويكونون لك عدوا, right? Because for إنهم, for indeed they, for indeed they, right? فإنهم يحسدونك, and we know يحسدونك, we know that verb, right? We pronounce this verb very often in our prayers, right? What is the root of this verb? Yahsudun. The root is ha, sin, dal. Hasad, right? Hasad. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. And we seek refuge in Allah from the envious whenever they envy, right? So, فَإِنَّهُمْ يَحْسُدُونَكَ, for indeed they will envy you, وَيَكُونُونَ لَكَ عَدُوًا, and they will be an enemy for you. And where am I getting will? From the context, right? From the context. Because he's saying don't inform your brothers of this vision, right? Which means that in the present, as long as you are silent, they're not your enemies. But once you do so, once you inform them, they will then become your enemies, right? So the future tense is understood, it's implied by the context. And then we have the next section, hasadul ikhwa, the envy of the brothers, right? The envy of the brothers. Let's see if we can get through this story here in the time we have left. Yeah, I think so. The envy of the brothers, right? Hasadul ikhwati. وكان يوسف له أخ آخر من أمه اسمه بنيامين. And Yusuf, kana lahu akhun. If I ignore kana, let's ignore kana and let's just say Yusuf lahu akhun, right? Yusuf lahu akhun. You have la, which means that there is possession. And I could have stated this in two different ways, right? There's possession here. And la is because he's possessing another human being, right? Yusuf, we're going to say Yusuf lahu akh. I could have also said li Yusuf akh, right? So Yusufu lahu akhun. Or I could have said li, right? Li, that's a preposition, right? Li Yusuf fi. Nope, it's a diptone. Li Yusuf fa. Akhun. So what this means is Yusuf has a brother. Yusuf has a brother. And that's what this means as well. Yusuf has a brother. Two different ways of saying that. Once I put kana here, if I say kana Yusuf lahu akhun, or kana li Yusuf akhun, and the second way is better. This is better. Idiomatically, it's better to say it like this. Then what that does is it changes has to had, right? Yusuf had a brother. وَكَانَ يُوسُفُ لَهُ أَخٌ آخَرُ, another brother. Yusuf had another brother, min ummihi, from his mother, ismuhu Benyamin. And what does that mean? He had another brother from his mother. It means that the other brothers, right? The other brothers that he had, all those other brothers, they were from a different mother, right? So Yusuf and the relationship between them was that of a step relationship, right? But he had one full brother. The rest were half brothers, and his name was ismuhu Benyamin. His name was Benyamin, right? Benjamin. وكان يعقوب يحبهما حبا شديدا. And Yaqub, again, kana plus a present tense verb, yuhibbu, but then you have yuhibbuhuma, right? And Yaqub used to love them, and huma refers to dual. So now there were two people who were mentioned, Yusuf and Benjamin. And Yaqub used to love Yusuf and Benjamin hubban shadidan. That's interesting. يحبهما حبا شديدا. Why do I have this word hubban here? That he loved them an intense love. Shadid is intense, right? So it could have been, right? It could have been وَكَانَ يَعْقُوب يُحِبُّهُمَا شَدِيدًا, right? And Yaqub, right? Yaqub used to love them intensely. But if I say يُحِبُّهُمَا حُبًّا شَدِيدًا, then it changes that to an exclamation point, right? It's for more emphasis, right? And that is when you take the noun that belongs to the verb and you make it mansub, right? You make it mansub. We haven't seen that yet, and I don't really want to get into it now. But basically, if you have a verb and the noun that's associated with the verb comes after, then that noun, if it's meant to emphasize the verb, then it will be mansub, and it has its own category. We're not going to cover it right now, but I wanted to give you an example of this from the Quran. Kalla, Allah says, Kalla idha dukkat al-ardu dakkan dakka, right? Nay, when the earth dukkat means to be pulverized to powder, right? So basically, you have dakkan and dakkan. So pulverized to powder says, nay, when the earth shall be pulverized, you can say pulverized, yeah? But then you have the noun that belongs to the verb. What is the verb for pulverized? Wow. I don't know what's going on, you guys. I'm so sorry. Okay, so the word for pulverized is dakka. Kalla idha dukkat, and it's feminine because earth is feminine, ard is feminine. Dukkat al-ard, right? But if you say dakkan, then it changes it to an exclamation point. Dukkat al-ardu dakkan. And then if you add another one, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala added another one here, and he said, dakkan dakka, right? Dakkan dakkan. Okay, so now it's even more emphasized, right? It's even more emphasized. But you can't really represent that in English even more, right? So that is when you take the noun that is associated with that verb and you emphasize the verb with its own noun. The noun becomes mansub, not because it's a direct object, not because it's khabar kana, but because it is called maf'ul mutlaq, right? Maf'ul mutlaq. And we will get into this. There are 5 types of maf'uls. There's maf'ul bihi, direct object, and there's maf'ul mutlaq. Now you know it, now you've seen it, and so when we see it again, I might just point it out, but it's for emphasis, right? And there's 3 more maf'uls that we're going to get into. All of them are mansub, right? But the only one that's a direct object is the maf'ul bihi, that's a direct object, and then this is where you take the noun of the verb and emphasize it, right? Which is known as maf'ul mutlaq. categorical method. Right? Okay. All right, so let's see, where are we? حبا شديدا وكان لا يحب مثلهما أحدا. And he لا يحب, he used to not like مثلهما, their مثل, their likeness, or their likes, right? He did not like their likes. He did not like anyone the way that he liked them, right? He did not like any of them, anyone. Mithl means the example of them, the example of them, the likeness of them, right? Such as them, okay? Excuse me. Alhamdulillah. نعم. وكان الإخوة يحسدون يوسف وبنيامين ويغضبون. And the brothers used to envy. كان الإخوة, and here you have this now is singular, whereas إخوة is plural. And that is because, that is because it is a jumla fi'aliyah, and the verb must be in the singular and agree in gender. Well, actually, usually. Let's not get too deep into it. كان الإخوة يحسدون. يحسدون means that they used to envy Yusuf and Benjamin ويغضبون, and become angry. And here you have it conjugated because the fa'il is not mentioned. إخوة is not the fa'il of kana, but it's called ismu kana, right? But it's acting like the fa'il of kana. It's acting like the fa'il of kana, even though it's a mubtada, right? In its root. So let's not get too bogged down into that. We just understand why kana has to be singular. It's similar to that rule where if you had a different verb, then ikhwa would have been the fa'il, and whenever the fa'il is mentioned, the fa'il is singular. Kana behaves the same way. Even though we don't call it the fa'il. We don't call ikhwa the fa'il of kana. كانوا يقولون, they used to say, لماذا يحب أبونا يوسف وبنيامين أكثر. They used to say, why does our father love Yusuf and Benjamin more? And here you have a question mark followed by a period. ولماذا يحب أبونا يوسف وبنيامين وهما صغيران ضعيفان. And why does our father Yusuf why does our father love Yusuf, right? Yusuf is Yusufa, so it's a direct object. Why does our father love Yusuf? What if it was our father Yusuf? Why does our father Yusuf love, right? Then this would have been a dhamma, because it would have followed Abuna, our father Yusuf, right? But it's not a dhamma, it's a fatha because it's a direct object. Why does our father love Yusuf and Benjamin, wahuma, while they are saghirani, young, da'ifani, young and weak. They're so young and weak. Why would he love them, right? And here you have a question mark and a period. This is why I say ignore punctuation in Arabic. They have no idea what they're doing. There's no reason for it. And this is so rampant. You find this in so many different books. Sometimes you find it in newspapers. It's just so wild and outrageous. And you totally ignore it because Arabic has no punctuation. Just the other day, I was teaching a class on fiqh, and I interpreted something wrongly because there was a period there. Someone put a period, the editor put a period, and I thought that the next sentence didn't have anything to do with the previous sentence. I thought it was a brand new sentence. But without the period, I would have read it as one flowing sentence, and that sentence would have referred back to what was mentioned before. And I created a big old, it was a big old misunderstanding, right? And I had to correct it. Actually, I couldn't correct it. I couldn't understand it, and I had to clarify it with my teacher to figure out what was going wrong. And in his copy of the same book, there was no period, right? And he said, no, you're reading it wrong. Why are you reading it like that? I said, because there's a period there. He said, there's no period. And he didn't have a period. And Arabic doesn't have any punctuation. So this is just, alhamdulillah. لماذا لا يحبنا مثل يوسف وبنيامين? Why does he not love us? Why does he not love us, right? Mithla Yusufa, the likeness of Yusuf, such as Yusuf, as he likes Yusuf or loves Yusuf. And Benjamin, Nahnu shubbanun, we are youth, we are young, right? We are young, aqwiya'u, we are young and strong. We are young and strong. And why is aqwiya'u a diptote? Why is it a diptote? It's a diptote because this is a broken plural with 3 syllables or more. And we talked about that. And it's a diptote because it has one dhamma, whereas shubban is 2 syllables. Shubban. Aqwiya, 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 right? And strong, well, wait a minute. How could strong be a plural, right? Strong is not a plural in English. In Arabic, you have nouns can be plural and adjectives can also be plural, right? And that is something that you will learn when, as you're acquiring more and more vocabulary. So the singular for qawi, the singular for strong is qawi, right? Qawi. And the plural is aqwiya, right? Aqwiya. And sa'id is happy. Su'ada, right? Su'ada'u, aqwiya'u, qawiyun, right? Sa'idun. This is singular. But the plural is su'ada, right? So these are adjectives. Happy, strong, right? These are adjectives, and the adjectives have broken plurals. They also have broken plurals, just like jabal and jibal, mountain, mountains, right? And this is here, this is a noun, right? This is a noun. And this is an adjective. But both nouns and adjectives in Arabic have broken plurals. هذا أمر عجيب. This is a wondrous affair. وكان يوسف ولدا صغيرا. And Yusuf was a young boy. فحكى الرؤيا لإخوته. And so he narrated the story to his brothers. And that's not the case. That didn't happen in the Surah Yusuf, right? That did not happen. This is total projection here. That Yusuf was a young boy, and so he ignored the instructions of his father, and he told his brothers. This is not the case. This is not what happened. There's no basis for this, right? But we're just going to benefit from the language. فَحَكَى الرُّؤْيَا لِإِخْوَتِهِ. And so he narrated the tale or the vision to his brothers. وَغَضِبَ الْإِخْوَةُ جِدًّا. And the brothers were angered, very angered, right? جِدًّا. لَمَّا سَمِعُوا الرُّؤْيَا. When they heard the vision. وَاشْتَدَّ حَسَدُهُمْ. And their envy, اشْتَدَّ, increased in severity. وَاجْتَمَعَ الْإِخْوَةُ يَوْمًا وَقَالُوا اقْتُلُوا يُوسُفَ. And the brothers met together يَوْمًا, one day, وَقَالُوا, and they said, اقْتُلُوا يُوسُفَ, اقْتُلُوا, kill Yusuf, أَوْ اطْرَحُوهُ أَرْضًا بَعِيدَةً, or banish him to a distant land. Banish him to a distant land. حينئذ, at that time, يكون أبوكم, or thereupon, حينئذ is thereupon. We covered this, I think, in one of the early chapters. Thereupon, your father, يكون لكم خالصا, will be khalisan, which means sincere toward you. He will be sincere, or he will be sort of he will single you out. He will have no one to turn to as the object of his love but you. وَيَكُونُ حُبُّهُ لَكُمْ خَالِصًا, and his love will be solely for you, right? It will be for you solely, خَالِصًا. قَالَ أَحَدُهُمْ لَا, one of them said, no, بَلْ, rather, أَلْقُوهُ, cast him, فِي بِئْرٍ, in a well, cast him in a well. في طريق, in along a way, cast him in a well along a way. يأخذه بعض المسافرين, or يأخذه, and here you have a dhamma, a sukoon here, and we don't know why this is a sukoon yet. We don't know why, but we will come across this. This is one of the more advanced concepts of why this sukoon exists here, but let's ignore it for now. Cast him in a well along the way, بعض المسافرين, in order that one, not in order that, but that if you do so, then one of the travelers, will take him up, right? Will take him. وَوَافَقَ عَلَيْهِ جَمِيعُ الْإِخْوَةِ, and all of the brothers agreed to that, right? Agreed to that. We say in Arabic, agreed on that, right? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wal asri inna al-insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa aminu as-salihat. Wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.